In the last video, I showed you guys how to set up a still life. Today, I'm going to show you how to go about creating a thumbnail sketch. Now, a thumbnail sketch is a sketch that you do before you move on to a main drawing. Typically, you'll separate a regular sized piece of paper into several pieces, and then you'll draw a couple of small, easy to remember, and easy to gesture drawings. So let's begin by separating our paper into multiple pieces. So this is the paper straight edge we made back in our first video when we created our value scales. This paper straight edge is going to just get lined up with somewhere around the middle of the paper, and you'll make a line, turn your paper, and obviously since our straight edge is the same length as our piece of paper, you'll just put it from edge to edge, make a second line. Now, I have 4 different images that I'm going to be doing thumbnail sketches of. You should also be doing your thumbnail sketches of multiple different images. And the purpose of that is you are sketching because you're trying to figure out what it is exactly you want to draw. So, in these 4 boxes, the 4 pictures that are going to be on screen will take the space of the corresponding boxes that they appear in. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the top left image, which is the 2 boxes leaning. As we discussed earlier, a thumbnail sketch is all about figuring out shapes. The details, not as important, because we sincerely just want to figure out how big things need to be in our paper or in our composition, and what kind of shapes all of the different pieces make. This is one of my boxes, and I'm just taking a moment to look it over, compare it to the original. It honestly does not feel like it's big enough, but I'm going to continue forward and just draw because, again, this is a practice sketch. Making thumbnail sketches can be this style that I'm doing right now, where I am going to do the 4 different drawings, but you can also use thumbnail sketches when you are drawing the same subject matter over and over again, because you are trying to figure out your shapes and your details and all that for that specific piece that you've already committed to. And when it comes time for us to commit to a still life that we want to create, we will do the same. There's a wrinkle right here in the blanket. So I'm just going to draw the shape of that. You can see that I'm drawing the shapes of the different shadows that are in my picture. I am simply trying to figure out just where everything's going to be when this picture is done. I've got a couple more wrinkles here. I'm going to make them a little bit lighter. A couple wrinkles wrinkles in the back here. I have somewhat of a separation here between my table and my wall. And now I'm going to shade. Before I do that, I'm going to throw a line here and a line here for my two boxes, or for my box where the canvas is folded, because there are lines in the canvas there that I can see in the picture. And I'm going to start shading. This right here is going to be a somewhat dark shadow, and that value scale we created is going to come in handy. Go ahead and put that right there so that we can have a comparison of our shadows. So if I'm shading this in as I am now and looking at my boxes on the bottom, this is looking to be about similar, between a 3 and a 4. It's not a bad spot for this particular shadow to be, because there's going to be shadows inside of this shadow that'll be even darker. That will be just underneath this box here. Gets a little bit darker. And in our wrinkle here. When you're doing your shading, you typically want your shading to follow in the shape of your object. This is important, especially when you're doing three-dimensional objects like the ones in the other thumbnails, because your shading should describe that object. So in this case of these boxes, I'm making my shading go up and down because this box is a flat surface here. On the bottom here, I'm trying to curve, do a little crosshatch that goes in multiple directions, because the blanket has more than just a flat area to it. This side of this box, which is going to have an ever so slightly lighter shadow than the one that it cast, my shading is going to just go along the same direction that the edge of the box is going in. I can darken up this corner a little bit here. Darken up just that corner there. If you look at my thumbnail, this shadow isn't round at the top. It extends out a little bit, but the part that extends is light compared to the rounded bit. This is because the light is bleeding over the edge of the square canvas panel, and where the light is bleeding, it's making that part of the shadow lighter. This edge of this canvas panel needs to be the same darkness as the shadows we've already done. And then we have some shading to do back here. And again, even though I have gotten a little specific with my shading in some of this, this is supposed to be a sample thumbnail sketch. So realistically, just adding a couple of these wrinkles in place here, shading my back wall just a very tiny bit. This will actually be similar to like a 1 on our value scale, just to give it a little bit of a different tone to the rest of our drawing. Very lightly adding a little bit of texture in here. And that's our first thumbnail sketch pretty much done. There's an area back here that's a little bit darker from all the wrinkles in that space. Line and the light not being concentrated on it. So you can see we could spend as much time on this thumbnail sketch as we possibly wanted. We could realize more details of it, but at this time, this is good enough for the purpose of this sketch. We're going to move on to the next box. Because this picture is vertical, I'm going to turn my paper. Leave my value scale here off to the side. And I'm going to start this one. We have a hat, which is somewhat close to the top here. Use my eraser. This is a more rounded object than the one that we just did. So the shading, obviously, is going to be different. Get some of the details of the hat in here. Brim. And the bottom lip of the brim. You can see this satin sash going across it. It kind of fades right around there into the shadow. And then underneath the hat is a roll of shop towels. So I'm just going to draw that in here like so. We have a shadow shooting off to the side. Wrinkle right about here. This is kind of the line here of the table and the back wall. And now we're just going to get into some of our shading. So again, because this is a rounded object, our shading is going to be rounded as well. If you were to just shade this and just have straight lines going across in both directions, you would make a very flat looking hat. And we don't want our hat to look flat because, well, it's not. So what I'm going to do is do that. And my crosshatch is going to be rounded as well. On the actual side of the hat here, you can see I am using straight lines up and down. And the reason that is because while we do have the roundness of it in the cylindrical aspect, the sides of it are going to be straight. So if you do this crosshatch correctly, as I am showing you how to here, you will get that effect of the hat looking like a cylinder and not like a ball or square. Add a little bit of shading in here, a little light shading in here. Obviously, this hat isn't white. It is a black hat. So we can shade in our areas here. Get that satin looking area done here. It has a reflection in the light. So there's going to be a spot where it is lighter. Top of the hat is flat. So my cross hatching for the top of the hat can be a little flat. And then when we get down to the shop towel, we can start cross hatching same way we did the top of the hat, with straight lines going up and down and curved lines going side to side. Do some shading down here for our sheet that we laid down. Couple more wrinkles. Wrinkle in the background here up against the wall. And some light shading, because obviously nothing in our thumbnail is pure white this time compared to our double squares that we did in the last thumbnail. Now that I've finished explaining the shading methods used for the different shapes, I'm going to go ahead and complete these last two thumbnails, but I'm going to speed up the video because obviously it's getting a little long at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this quick tutorial, and look out for the example practices that you'll have to do. All right? Now, for a quick note, you'll see in the image for this thumbnail that in the walk, you can see a reflection of everything that is in the walk. If this was a full-fledged normal drawing, you would have to draw all of the pieces of that reflection. Because this is a thumbnail, I'm going to go ahead and gesture a couple of the things that are being reflected in the walk, but it'll mostly just be general shapes and outlines. That's all I have for you today. You should be able to use this tutorial as a way of figuring out how to do your own thumbnail sketches of your still life that you'll be doing for our main assignment. If you have any questions, feel free to message me within the assignment. Otherwise, you should be ready to go. Have a good one.